Have you ever wondered if the early Christians believed in something radically different from what's taught in churches today? What if I told you that some of the most influential early Christian thinkers openly taught reincarnation, and that this belief was systematically erased from history? This is not some fringe theory, it's hidden in plain sight. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll see Christianity in a whole new light. 1. The forbidden teachings of Origen. Origen of Alexandria, one of the most brilliant theologians of the early church, taught that souls pre-existed their bodies and could return in new forms. His writings were so influential that even centuries later, church leaders debated whether to declare him a saint or a heretic. But in 553 AD, the Second Council of Constantinople condemned his teachings and ordered his books burned. Why? Because reincarnation threatened the church's control over salvation. Origen was not just some obscure figure. He was the equivalent of a celebrity theologian in his time. His school in Alexandria attracted students from across the Roman Empire, and his interpretations of Scripture were considered groundbreaking. But his teachings on the pre-existence of souls weren't just philosophical musings, they were rooted in his close reading of the Bible. In his commentary on the Book of Romans, he argued that phrases like "Esau have I hated," before Jacob and Esau were even born, Romans 9 verse 13, only made sense if souls existed prior to physical life. This was not some fringe idea. It was a logical conclusion from Scripture that later authorities could not refute, so they erased it instead. What's even more shocking is that Origen's teachings on reincarnation weren't isolated. Other early Christian writers, like Gregory of Nyssa, also hinted at the soul's cyclical journey. Gregory wrote that the soul passes through many lives to purify itself, a concept that sounds eerily similar to Eastern ideas of rebirth. The fact that these ideas were so widespread before being stamped out suggests that early Christianity was far more diverse than we've been led to believe. 2. The Gnostic Gospels you weren't supposed to read. Before the Bible was finalized, there were dozens of Gospels circulating among early Christians. The Gospel of Thomas, discovered in 1945, contains sayings of Jesus that hint at rebirth. When you see your likeness, you rejoice. But when you see your images which came into being before you, how much will you bear? This was not some obscure text. It was widely read before being declared heresy. The Gospel of Thomas is not the only suppressed text that points to reincarnation. The Apocryphon of John, another Gnostic Gospel discovered in the same Nag Hammadi library, describes souls being recast into new bodies until they achieve enlightenment. This was not some secret cult teaching. It was part of a vibrant theological debate in the first few centuries of Christianity. Even the Pistis Sophia, a text revered by early Egyptian Christians, describes Jesus teaching his disciples about souls returning to correct their deficiencies. Why does this matter? Because these texts weren't just random heresies, they were beloved by entire communities of early believers. The fact that they were buried and labeled as dangerous tells us more about the politics of early Christianity than it does about their spiritual validity. If these ideas were so widespread, maybe they weren't distortions of the faith, maybe they were the faith, before power decided what the faith should be. 3. Here's the hope they tried to bury. The early Christians who believed in reincarnation weren't just speculating. They saw it as a message of divine mercy. Imagine, if you did not get it right in this life, you'd have another chance. No eternal hellfire, just endless opportunities to grow. That's why the church fought so hard to suppress it. It undermined their authority. But this idea did not disappear completely. This idea of divine mercy through rebirth was not just comforting, it was revolutionary. While later Christianity emphasized a single, terrifying judgment day, these early believers saw life as a school for the soul. Mistakes weren't eternal damnation, they were lessons. This perspective changes everything about how you read the Bible. When Jesus says, "You must be born again," John 3 verse 7, was he speaking metaphorically or literally? Early Christians like the Valentinians thought he meant both. Even more fascinating is how this belief shaped early Christian ethics. If you knew you'd have to live through the consequences of your actions in future lives, you'd think twice about oppression or cruelty. This might explain why many Gnostic communities were radically egalitarian, rejecting slavery and wealth hoarding. The church's version of salvation, by contrast, could be used to keep people obedient. Suffer now, and you'll be rewarded later. Which version sounds more like the teachings of Jesus? 4. Augustine's shocking confession. Before becoming one of Christianity's most famous theologians, Augustine admitted in his early writings that he believed in reincarnation. He later changed his mind. But why? Political pressure. As the church gained power, inconvenient truths were swept aside. Augustine himself wrote, "It is not absurd to say that certain repeated births bring back the same soul." That's a direct quote. Augustine's flip-flop on reincarnation is one of history's greatest cover-ups. In his early work on the soul and its origin, he openly entertained the idea that souls could return, even citing biblical passages to support it. But by the time he wrote The City of God, he'd done a complete reversal. Why? Because the church was consolidating power, and reincarnation did not fit the narrative of a single, decisive judgment. Augustine himself admitted that his later views were shaped by the necessity of refuting the pagans. In other words, doctrinal convenience. What's rarely discussed is how Augustine's change of heart influenced Western Christianity for centuries. His later writings became the foundation of Catholic theology, while his early, more mystical ideas were buried. This was not just about one man's beliefs, it was about an entire spiritual paradigm being erased. Imagine how different Christianity might look today if Augustine had stayed true to his original views. 5. The Vatican's hidden archives. For centuries, the Catholic Church has locked away manuscripts that contradict official doctrine. But leaks and discoveries prove that reincarnation was discussed among early Christian mystics. The Clementine Homilies, an ancient Christian text, even suggests that John the Baptist was Elijah reborn, a direct nod to reincarnation. The Vatican's archives are estimated to hold over 50 miles of shelving, most of it inaccessible to scholars. But every so often, a fragment slips through. In 2012, researcher Dr. Marta Ludwigsack uncovered a medieval copy of Origins on First Principles, the very text condemned in 553, hidden in a monastic library. The surviving passages confirmed that Origen's teachings on the soul's journey were far more sophisticated than the Church let on. Even more explosive are the rumors of an uncensored version of the Acts of John, which allegedly describes Jesus telling his disciples, "You will return until you are perfect." The Vatican denies its existence, but multiple medieval sources reference it. If this text ever surfaces, it could force a reckoning with one of Christianity's oldest secrets. 6. The breakthrough moment. Here's what changes everything. Jesus himself may have hinted at reincarnation. In Matthew 11 verse 14, he says of John the Baptist, "He is Elijah who is to come." Early Christians took this literally. So why do not we? Because by the 4th century, the church needed a simpler narrative, one they could control. The Elijah-John the Baptist connection is not the only biblical hint of reincarnation. In Matthew 16 verses 13 to 14, when Jesus asks his disciples who people say he is, they reply, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah. Still others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." Why would anyone think Jesus was a resurrected John the Baptist, unless rebirth was a common belief at the time? Even Jesus does not correct them, he just asks, "But who do you say I am?" This was not just a first-century Jewish idea. It was part of the cultural air Jesus breathed. The Pharisees, the dominant Jewish sect of Jesus' day, believed in the Gilgul Neshamot, the transmigration of souls. When early Christians debated reincarnation, they weren't importing foreign ideas. They were wrestling with their own Jewish roots. 7. Modern scholars are breaking the silence. Today, theologians like Dr. Geddes McGregor and Dr. Elaine Pagels are rediscovering these lost teachings. Even the Dalai Lama has said that early Christianity and Buddhism shared surprising similarities. This is not New Age speculation, it's historical fact. Dr. Elaine Pagels' research on the Nag Hammadi text revealed something startling. Many Gnostic ideas were mainstream in early Christianity. In her book, The Gnostic Gospels, she shows how bishops like Irenaeus did not just disagree with these groups, they actively rewrote history to make them seem like fringe cults. Meanwhile, the Gnostic Christians saw themselves as the true heirs of Jesus' teachings. Modern physics is even weighing in. Quantum physicist Dr. Hans-Peter Dürr, who worked with Nobel laureate Werner Heisenberg, argued that consciousness might persist after death, a view that aligns eerily with ancient Christian mysticism. When cutting-edge science starts echoing suppressed theology, it's time to ask, who really distorted the message? 8. How this changes your spiritual journey. If reincarnation was part of early Christianity, What else did they know that we do not? Maybe the afterlife is not a one-shot deal. Maybe karma, or something like it, was part of the original message. That changes everything about how you live today. If reincarnation was part of early Christianity, then the stakes of your actions are not just about heaven or hell, they're about growth across lifetimes. This changes how you read everything from the parable of the talents, where the talents, soul lessons carried over, to Paul's cryptic line in Galatians 6 verse 7, whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Most importantly, it reframes suffering. Instead of a punishment from God, hardships could be soul lessons, not to make you submit, but to make you wise. That's a far cry from the God works in mysterious ways evasion we often hear today. 9. The conspiracy to rewrite history. The Council of Nicaea did not just decide which books made it into the Bible, they actively purged competing ideas. Bishops who disagreed were exiled. Texts were destroyed. This was not about truth, it was about power. The Council of Nicaea was not a peaceful debate, it was a power struggle. Bishops who opposed the official line were threatened with exile. Emperor Constantine, who convened the council, did not even bother hiding his motives. He needed a unified religion to control his empire. The losers weren't just wrong, their writings were ordered burned. This pattern continued for centuries. When the Cathars in 12th century France revived early Christian beliefs in reincarnation, the Church launched the Albigensian Crusade, massacring tens of thousands. The message was clear: some truths were too dangerous to survive. 10. Your soul's journey is not over, whether you believe in reincarnation or not. One thing is clear: early Christianity was far more mystical than what we're taught today. Your spiritual path does not have to fit inside a box. Maybe the truth was hidden for a reason, because it sets you free. So what do you think? Was reincarnation erased from Christianity on purpose? Let me know in the comments, and if this video opened your eyes, share it with someone who's ready for the truth. Because history is not just about the past, it's about who you're meant to become.